Well, there are predictions that the Reserve Bank won't start cutting interest rates until November. The RBA is tipped to be the last central bank in the world to cut rates as inflation drops slower compared to other countries at the moment. Well, joining me now to discuss this is independent economist Chris Richardson from Rich Insight. Chris, thanks for your time today. Good morning to you. I mean, our tax cuts slow the arrival of our rate cuts. The job market also remains pretty tight. Do you agree with the forecast here?
I do. And there are, as you said, a bunch of reasons for it. One is as simple as inflation started later in Australia and our rates are still a bit higher than a bunch of other nations. So you'd expect to see them cutting rates before that arrived in Australia. But the other big factor, as the other one you noted, tax cuts. We are going to get relief in Australia from pressure on our cost of living, but that first round of relief will come as tax cuts in 3 months. That pushes back the timing of those rate cuts.
So when will we likely see interest rate relief then for Aussies who are doing it tough still?
It's going to be, on my assessment and the assessment of economists in general, the end of 2024. The Reserve Bank has a meeting in November. And yes, if you've got a mortgage, and remembering Australians on average have much larger mortgages than you see in similar nations, it's going to be a long time between drinks.
Now, when we talk about struggling inflation and struggling to bring that down in Australia compared to other countries, you mentioned there that we started, inflation started earlier and that kind of thing. But when will Australia likely declare victory on inflation? Are there other factors that are contributing to this as to why we're struggling to bring it down?
And we are doing very well. Worth a reminder that inflation in prices in general for consumers is just under 3.5%. That's less than half the peak we saw at the end of 2022. And you would expect that it will continue to improve from here, and indeed probably at a rate faster than the Reserve Bank is imagining. But it's always been that last mile. It's the tricky stuff that inflation is left in now. It's things like rents, it's things like insurance, it's things like education costs. That combination of things, broadly services, that's going to be harder to defeat inflation on that front. We're not the only ones. All around the world, you're seeing a similar story. And because they started their inflation earlier, they're seeing that story play out earlier. But the US is a great example. Inflation has struggled to go down in the last couple of months in the US. That means their rate cuts, yes, they'll get them comfortably before ours, but not that soon.